So we are back. Jennifer, we're back in session. We are moving to item 7 on our agenda, which is the Assault Weapons Engagement Plan. I hope everyone has had an opportunity to thoroughly read the item. I have a couple of comments I'm going to make, and I'm going to turn it over to our Treasurer John Chung, who's with us, to make a few comments. We will then hear from the public. After public comments, we'll have a brief staff report, and then the committee can deliberate the item, ask questions, and discuss it. So before I turn it over to the treasurer, I want to thank the staff for their hard work and their responsiveness to not only this item, but their actions that they took post Sandy Hook, the tragedy of Sandy Hook Elementary School. You know, I've spent the better part of 30 years of my life in and around school teachers. I take my daughters to school more often than not. I drop them off with some of the most beautiful people that one could ever imagine. Anyone who has children or around children knows the innocence that they are. But I'm sitting here today as the chair of the investment committee at CalSTRS, not as a dad, not as a school teacher, but as the investment committee chairman. And the tragedies that have been unfolding in America's public schools are unthinkable. And they're unique to the greatest country on the face of the earth. A place that people wake up and they want to send their children to America. To think that one day we would be talking about this issue is beyond anything I could ever had imagined. And I think everyone in this room and anyone in this country, whoever thought that they would wonder whether or not their children would come home safe from school, whether or not there would be a murder on their campus, to stop and pause, just stop for a moment and really try to comprehend the insanity that has unfolded across our country. Legislators may or may not have the will or the desire or the ability to make change to reduce the likelihood that these tragedies will ever happen again. This country is in need of a transformation of its heart. That's what we need. We need a transformation of the human heart to see that this never happens again. I'm under no illusion that actions that we take today or into the future will end these horrific acts of murder at the hands of people that are mentally ill, using assault weapons whose only purpose is to kill other human beings. The only purpose of assault weapons is to kill other human beings in America's public schools. We're the world's largest teachers' pension fund. No action we take here will put an end to that type of violence. But to sit back and say that we have done enough, there's nothing else we can do, I believe would be a breach of our fiduciary duty. The companies that are the retailers and are the sellers and the peddlers of these weapons of war need to be held into account. We must hold them accountable. We must engage with them. We must talk with them. We must understand why they're selling these weapons, whose sole purpose is to kill other human beings. Individually and collectively, in our individual lives and collectively as a group, perhaps we can effectuate the change that is needed. Corporate America has been stepping up to the plate. We applaud those companies that have done so. The youth, the kids, have been unbelievable. Institutional investors can play a role through engagement, through partnership, and using our positions of great authority and influence to effectuate change, even if in the slightest bit. This item today, I believe, is one step in that direction, to do what we can as a group, to mitigate the risks that these companies have, that we invest in, the risks to their reputation, the risks that we face as a pension fund, not to do everything we possibly can without compromising the returns that we desperately need to pay the pension promise. We look forward to hearing from our treasurer this morning, who's been so instrumental in his leadership in pushing this forward. We look forward to hearing from testimony from members of the public, and then ultimately our staff report, who has been so responsive, who has exerted great leadership on this issue, and will continue to do so in the weeks and months ahead. I hope the committee will fully embrace the recommendations that appear in item 7. And with that, I'll turn over to our treasurer, John Chung.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, let me begin by thanking you for your words of raw honesty, courage, and hope. I think I am personally moved by them, and thank you for your vision and leadership on this issue. Chairperson Keeley and Investment Committee members, let me begin by thanking each of you, my fellow and friends, for your thoughtfulness and intrepid leadership. You have given and continue to give to this matter of quite literally life and death. From Harry and Dana to Jack, Chris, and Grant, and to the rest of the fine staff and consultants who worked with my office, my staff, towards today's vote, please accept my sincere and deepest gratitude. As the brother of a younger sister whose life was taken by senseless violence, as the son of a mother whose grief over that loss remains enduring, I know a thing or two about emptiness and pain. While the where, when, and how was different for each and every single one of us, I know a little bit about what many of you feel and why you are here today. But I also know the value of an organization that could justly as easily have extended to you their thoughts and prayers and sent all of us on our way. But they didn't. For that, we say thank you. It's been 84 days since 17 kids and their teachers lost their lives at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. 696 since the shooting at Orlando's Pulse nightclub. 889 since San Bernardino. 1,972 since Sandy Hook. 4,041 since Virginia Tech. And 6,959 since Columbine. In just the first 4 months of this year, 103 people have been killed. 103. And 309 wounded in mass shootings in communities across this nation. If Congress and state houses are either unwilling or unable to pass sensible policies to stop our schoolyards, work sites, and places of worship from becoming killing fields, then let's take the battle to where the money is. If the NRA tells us that we are no match for their torrent of money they can rain down in support of blocking common sense reform, then let's respond. We will become that storm. I've called upon our nation's largest institutional investors to use the power of their purse strings to prevent another American, another one of us, from having to bury a child, a sibling, a spouse, because of a scourge so uniquely American that no other developed nation on this globe is so plagued. To date, BlackRock and Citigroup have adopted policies stating they will pull back or prohibit investing in, lending to, or financing the mass proliferation of military-grade assault weapons for civilian use. My office is working with at least 3 additional Wall Street investment banks on similar policy changes. When history looks back on the struggle to tame this nation's senseless and growing gun violence epidemic, today will not just be remembered as a moment, but as the beginning of a movement. Should you adopt the policy laid out before you by both my office and CalSTRS staff, you will be the first state public pension fund to adopt a progressive divestment policy aimed at curbing the sale of banned military-grade assault weapons. What do I mean by banned military-grade assault weapons? As we have seen far too often, the weapon of choice in many mass shootings is a military-style assault rifle, like an AR-15. Californians, through their elected representatives, have banned the sale or possession of these unlawful firearms. By adopting the progressive divestment proposal before you, California's second largest pension fund will no longer be investing in a deadly product considered such a public health threat that if any Californian were caught selling or buying one today, it would earn them prison time. 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 mass shootings occur at schools and businesses. By adopting today's proposal, the nation's largest teachers' pension fund will no longer be plunking teachers' pension contributions into the proliferation of weapons that are killing the very educators that our organization was chartered to protect and advance the prosperity of. Throughout my presentation, I've used the term progressive divestment to describe the proposal crafted by both my office and CalSTRS staff. Allow me to explain. The proposal before you directs staff to engage dealers of illegal firearms using a 3-step process aimed at persuading them to alter their business practices. Those 3 progressive steps include, number 1, engaging with wholesale and retail sellers of assault weapons banned in California to persuade them to end such sales. 2, if sales continue or a company declines to engage with us, we will use our shareholder proxy powers to cast votes against retaining the company's entire board of directors. Step number 3, if these steps fail, we will actively develop and consider divestment options. Members, I am pleased to report that this proposal is consistent with our existing engagement policy. Just like you would never take a wiffle ball bat to the major leagues, this proposal simply adds leverage to ensure that the efficacy of our engagements. Engagement works better when it is backed up by the real and imminent threat of divestment. I, and more importantly, fiduciary counsel, can represent that this progressive divestment proposal is faithful to our fiduciary duties as board members to safeguard and enhance the fund's assets for the benefit of our members. Before making this motion, I would like to remind the board, we are at a pivotal time in this nation's debate over gun violence. The scourge that puts military-style weapons designed only, as Harry mentioned, to kill other people in the hands of civilians is weakening. Major American brands, ranging from Dick's Sporting Goods, Enterprise Holdings, and United Airlines, to LL Bean, Best Western, and Walmart are severing their ties with the NRA or changing their gun sale policies. Gun company stocks are plummeting with the recent major slump in sales. Smith & Wesson, one of America's iconic gun manufacturers, slashed manufacturing jobs by 25% last year, and its last quarter sales plummeted by 39%. Meanwhile, Remington, another totem in American gun history, just filed bankruptcy. The youth of our nation, led by the courageous and inspired students of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, have helped prepare this moment for us. Marches and protests have elevated and roiled the conscience of this nation. It is a moment that has arrived at a great price, a tragic price. With that, I'd like to make a motion at the appropriate time that we accept staff's recommendations and proceed with engagement and persuasion. And if that fails, that this board be positioned to divest its funds from the companies that are inundating our companies with military-grade assault weapons. And through this divestment effort, we, at least, would be doing our part in preventing these hideous weapons from continuing to be used in the cruel and barbarous murder of our friends, our neighbors, and our loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Chung. We're going to, at the appropriate time, take up the motion. At this point, we're going to hear from members of the public who are here in attendance to speak on this issue. If you could get to the microphones, we would appreciate it. And we'll hear from members of the public. We'll hear a brief staff report, and then we'll entertain a motion. So we'll start with Carol Landale. Welcome.
Good morning.
She is Brady Campaign San Diego retired school teacher.
Thank you. By the end of today, 9 children will have been killed by a gun. By the end of this week, there will be at least 1 school shooting. By the end of in the past month, there have been at least 3 instances of accidental shootings in a school by a trained, responsible gun owner. By the end of this year, we will have lost 38,000 people to gun violence. My name is Carol Landale. I flew up here today from San Diego. I'm a retired teacher and a gun violence prevention activist working with the Brady Campaign and San Diegans for Gun Violence Prevention. I came up here today as a retired teacher to support the proposal that stirs Act Responsibly with my retirement portfolio. I became an activist in gun violence prevention movement after Sandy Hook massacre. And since then, we have petitioned, we have lobbied, we have marched, we have demonstrated. It's time now that we hit the gun industry in the pocketbook. We have a president who has bought into the NRA's fear-mongering myth that more guns will make us safer. And he has called for arming teachers. Every single California teacher that I know stands firmly against this idea. We recognize that guns in schools do not make students safer. California schools are gun-free zones, and this is how they need to remain. Divesting from the firearm retailers whose products have the potential to kill our students and teachers is the right thing to do. I applaud CalSTRS for divesting from gun manufacturers in 2013 after Sandy Hook. And I thank Treasurer Chang for bringing this motion of divestment to the CalSTRS board. And I thank, put my glasses on, Senator Portantino for authoring this legislation. This strategy will take us a step further towards safety. You control my retirement savings, and I do not want my dollars invested in an industry that sells weapons that kill our children. I have here letters from San Diego teachers that are addressed to Chairman Harry Keeley. If I could pass those on to someone, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. Jessica Moore, a teacher from the San Diego area. Morning.
I began teaching 20 years ago at the young age of 23. I was very idealistic, thinking I could save the world, one school year at a time, one child at a time. Although my goal is still to have a positive, lasting impact on every student who walks through my door, the meaning of save has dramatically changed. My job description has drastically changed. Now my job requires me to console crying 4th graders during lockdowns. It has forced me to analyze every door, room, and exit on the entire campus. But the most unfathomable change is that when I think about saving my students, I think of it in terms of taking a bullet for them. My name is Jessica Moore. I am not only a teacher, but a mother and a gun violence prevention activist. I am here today to urge the board to divest our pension funds from companies that sell weapons banned in the state. For too long, the gun lobby has used their money to gain power over us and our safety, or lack of, because we know more guns do not make us safer. We say enough. CalSTRS is the nation's second largest pension fund with assets totaling over $200 billion. Now is the time to use our money to take back the power and help save lives. We have done it in the past by divesting funds from gun manufacturers. Let's raise the bar. I urge you to support California State Treasurer John Chiang's proposal to now divest from companies who continue to sell military-style assault weapons. Let's show the country that California protects students and teachers over profits. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Hopkins,
Cordova.
Cordua.
That's good
Welcome,
enough.
Catherine.
Mr. Treasurer, Mr. Chair, and Board, thank you for having me. My name is Catherine Hopkins Cordova, and I am your constituent. I am a beneficiary of the obligation that you have to represent the teachers of California. I retired in June after a career in teaching and became active in the San Diego Coalition for Gun Violence Prevention in July. I served in 2 Southern California school districts, Cajon Valley Unified School District and San Diego Unified School District. I am a 3rd-generation teacher, married to a retired teacher with the 4th generation in her kindergarten class in San Diego as we speak. I am also the victim of gun violence, having been robbed at gunpoint in a safe neighborhood. Equally as difficult, I had the terrifying experience 2 years ago of being locked down in my 5th grade classroom with 34 10-year-olds, 2 parents with kindergartners, during a threat of a gun on campus. Students were asking me, Mrs. Cordova, who will you save? Guns do not belong in schools, nor do they belong in a responsible investment portfolio. As your constituent, and as a member of STRS, I do not want my livelihood and weaponry intermingled. Rather, I hearken to biblical principles as I ask you not to beat swords into plowshares. I would implore you to convert investments in arms into green investments, technology investments, anything that will benefit our state's children, teachers, and my granddaughter, rather than hurt them. And I respectfully thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this up, Treasurer Chiang. This issue is so important to so many of us. My name is Wendy Wheatcroft, and I'm a mom. I was a teacher for over 15 years, and now I'm the California chapter leader for Moms Demand Action. I taught for almost 15 years in an elementary school that rapidly grew to have more and more lockdowns. I have experienced the terror of being huddled in my classroom pre and post Sandy Hook with 21st graders. And my own kindergartner came home just a couple months ago terrified after she experienced her first lockdown and has not stopped talking to me about it ever since. Even in the car, Mama, do we have lockdowns in the car? On vacation, Mama, do we have lockdowns on vacation? It is abhorrent. Now I work tirelessly to strengthen gun laws locally, at the state level, and federally. And through this work that I do, I know that more guns do not make us safer. The thought that my retirement fund is tied into companies that are feeding into the gun lobby makes me feel sick to my stomach. I know that many other teachers feel the same. We cannot be in the line of fire and also contributing our hard-earned money to the firing squad. We have an opportunity here in this moment to stand up for students and teachers and do the right thing. If divestment were to save one life, then wouldn't it be worth it? Shouldn't we be doing everything possible to prevent any more needless gun deaths from happening? In a state that has the strongest gun laws in the country and is number 47th in gun deaths, this is our chance to continue to set an example to the rest of the country that we value people over profits. In fact, as the 5th largest economy in the world, we will not profit any less from making the right decision. Please divest our funds from the gun and ammo companies who profit off the deaths of 38,000 Americans every single year. The question isn't whether we can afford to divest. As we are in the grips of a public health epidemic with gun violence, we can't afford not to. Thank you.
President of SCUSD.
Thank you. Thank you for this time to speak. I'm Darrell Wu. I'm Vice President of the Sacramento City Unified School District. We are the 13th largest school district in California with an ADA of 47,000 students. In response to many school shootings, and most recently Parkland, Florida, on March 1st of this year, Sac City Unified passed Resolution 2992 relating to school shootings in the United States. And among other things, our board called for Congress to ban the manufacture, the sale, the purchase, possession, and use of assault weapons and large capacity ammunition cartridges, except those needed by the military and law enforcement. This proposal before you today regarding assault weapons engagement plan and divestment of guns, thank you, Treasurer Chung, is consistent with our resolution, and we ask for your approval. Thank you.
Donna Finkelstein? Is it Donna?
Yes.
Yeah, welcome, Donna.
Thank you.
From LA Unified School District, retired.
Yes. My name is Donna Finkelstein. I'm pleased to be here this morning to tell you my story. On August 10th, 1999, our lives changed forever. My 16-year-old daughter, Mindy, was shot at a Jewish day camp where she worked as a camp counselor in Granada Hills, California. An assault weapon, an Uzi, pierced her leg in her upper thigh, through and through, and in her calf, in one side and out the other. The self-proclaimed neo-Nazi who shot Mindy also shot over 70 rounds in a matter of minutes to kill Jews. Mindy survived from her wounds, but now at age 35, continues to suffer from PTSD. In 2012, I retired from Los Angeles Unified School District after 33 years as a high school counselor and magnet coordinator who dedicated to serving our students. Currently, I work part-time running an intervention program for graduating seniors. However, my most important role in life is that of a mother, grandmother, and advocate for gun safety. First, a founding member of the San Fernando Valley Brady chapter, and now a 5-year board member of Women Against Gun Violence in Los Angeles, where I promote the TALK Project and safe gun storage in the home. Since my daughter Mindy was shot 19 years ago, I have spoken to parents and student groups about gun violence prevention. For 3 years, I was on the crisis team at our local school district and counseled many students and their families affected by gun violence. The work is hard. Our kids are suffering. Our kids need to feel safe and be safe. So not that many years ago, I discovered that my teacher's pension, CalSTRS, invested my hard-earned retirement money in the gun industry with retailers selling these weapons. That information was horrifying, and this policy must change now. Our kids are dying. Have you ever participated in an active shooter drill? Have you ever been in a lockdown at a school site? It's truly frightening. These assault weapons, whose only purpose is to kill, are illegal to own or sell in California. Laws that my fellow activists and I helped pass Sounds so simple and logical that CalSTRS divest from illegal products and retailers. It's a moral issue. I have lived your greatest nightmare. Finally, some retailers are taking the right position and refusing to sell assault weapons that kill our children. We applaud them. Be responsible and set a policy today so that the rest of the nation's pension plans follow our lead. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Doug or Dave?
Dave.
Dave Finkelstein, and it says here, Dave, that you'll read a letter prepared by Fred Guttenberg, whose daughter Jamie was killed in the Parkland, Florida shooting. Is that correct?
I have my own statement, and I also have...
Yes,
that.
please. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. My name is Dave Finkelstein, and I am the father of Mindy Finkelstein, who was shot at the North Valley Jewish Community Center in Granada Hills, California, on August 10, 1999. I'm also a retired LAUSD school administrator after serving for 37 years in LAUSD. I've been retired since June 2009, and I am currently receiving my CalSTRS pension. My daughter Mindy was a 16-year-old counselor at the JCC when she was shot by Buford Furrow, who after getting caught proclaimed this was a wake-up call to America to start killing Jews. That shooting took place almost 19 years ago, when school or mass shootings were a rare event. Getting a phone call at work that your daughter has been shot is something no father should ever receive. Mindy has recovered from her physical wounds, but the emotional scars and post-traumatic stress issues will always remain. Unfortunately, not much has changed with our national gun laws since that time, and because of this lack of action from lawmakers, now school and mass shootings have become much more common. As a matter of fact, since my retirement, LAUSD schools are now holding active shooter drills in order to better protect students and faculty from these now inevitable events. Recently, I became aware that my own pension system, CalSTRS, is currently investing in companies that sell these types of weapons used in many of these shootings. CalSTRS has divested from investing in manufacturers that produce these weapons, but still continues to invest in companies and outlets that sell these weapons, even ones that are currently illegal in the state of California. We need to stop feeding into this insanity. As a CalSTRS pension recipient and also a victim of gun violence, I have to say enough is enough, and these type of investments from CalSTRS need to stop immediately. Thank you for listening, and I hope you all do the right thing for all of us. Okay. This is a letter from Fred Guttenberg, whose child was shot at the recent shooting. I'm writing strongly to urge you to support California State Teachers John Chang's proposal to responsibly withdraw taxpayer and teacher pension funds that are currently invested in the mass proliferation of assault weapons that are currently illegal to own or sell in California. These military-grade firearms, like the AR-15, are often the weapons of choice enduring mass shootings and are occurring with unacceptable frequency in schoolyards, work sites, and places of worship. My daughter, Jamie Guttenberg, was gunned down with an AR-15 assault rifle at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas on February 14th. She'll never graduate, have her first boyfriend, get her first job, get married, or have children. The night of her murder, her friends came over wearing Jamie's favorite color, orange. It turns out orange is the universal color for the gun safety movement. This inspired me to start the Orange Ribbons for Jamie organization, created to fight for common sense gun violence protection measures. Please, CalSTRS, be an agent of change and help me stop the proliferation of these banned weapons. Do the right thing and be on the right side of history. Be prepared to divest for our lives from companies that continue to sell military-style assault weapons. Let these companies know that they cannot go on placing greater value on short-term profits than they do on the safety and lives of our teachers and students. Sincerely, Fred Guttenberg, President of Orange Ribbons for Jamie.
Thank you. Will a member of the staff see that we have that letter for the record, please? Thank you. Thank you, sir. Akila Jones,
Yes.
Marjorie Stone Douglas High School alumni.
My name is Lauren Goldenberg. I've lived in LA for 18 years, but I was raised in Coral Springs, Florida, and I'm a proud alumni of Marjorie Stone M. Douglas High School, which sits on the Parkland border. In the wake of the mass murder that occurred there on Valentine's Day, my high school has become ingrained in our collective consciousness as a symbol of courage and of taking a stand. What we should be, first and foremost, is a school where kids go to learn and grow up beyond 14, 15, and 17 years of age, and a school where teachers aren't asked to bring in guns instead of teach. It really should be that simple. We all have a few places and memories of home that make us feel safe, even when we haven't been there in years. Marjorie Stone M. Douglas High School was one of those places for me. But this changed on February 14th. We've all seen the footage, but I feel it. Even today, I can feel those bullets ricochet when I see the cell phone videos. 17 people were killed. Over 3,000 were on that campus, and their families and friends will ache and hurt forever. And so will every single person who has ever walked those halls, previous teachers, alumni, our own parents. A friend's mom who lives and teaches nearby can't even drive by our school without crying. Of course, none of this is your fault, but you are here protecting teachers, so protect them. What could be more important than taking a stand against gun-related stocks before someone with an assault weapon storms into a school here in California? Now, I'm completely aware that you are in the business of protecting teachers' money, and while clearly your concern over teachers' money should not surpass teachers' lives, I agree you have a financial responsibility to protect pensions, and I've learned that gun-related stocks make money, a lot of money. Okay, fair enough. But there are other stocks you can invest in to also make money, and it is my firm belief and hope that gun-related stocks are not good business in the long term, particularly if leaders like you take a stand. Remember, you represent teachers. Teach us a lesson. I'm unable to be here this Wednesday morning, but I've written this letter in the earnest hope that my words and my story and my pain will reach you. Being an alumni of my incredible high school has afforded me the power to make my voice heard, but you have the power to make a direct and lasting change. Thank you.
Thanks, Akila. Would you see that that letter is presented to the staff for the record? Yes. And she read that on behalf of Laura Goldenberg, who is the alumni from high school. Denise Bradford, representing the California Teachers Association. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning. Denise Bradford, Chair of the California Teachers Association Retirement Committee. We would like to thank Chairperson Keeley and the Investment Committee and staff for their thoughtfulness in developing item number 7. California's educators deserve to know if their public pensions are supporting companies that are promoting and selling firearms and firearm accessories. The California Teachers Association applauds CalSTRS' previous actions after the Sandy Hook shooting to divest in companies making illegal firearms in California. And we thank CalSTRS for continuing to take a leadership role and actively engage with companies that participate in organizations and businesses promoting and selling firearms, ammunition, and accessories. We would greatly appreciate a report back in a public meeting about engagement discussions and steps considered before divesting. No teacher should ever wonder if their public pension is being used to support companies that are using corporate dollars to join and promote organizations and invest in businesses, promoting the use of firearms that are senselessly killing our students and teachers. Should CalSTRS need to consider divestment after exhausting all engagement methods, the California Teachers Association would ask the legislature to indemnify any loss of funds to the plan to demonstrate their priority for this important issue. CTA supports the recommendations included in item 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Seeing no one else from the public, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Aylman in a moment. Item 7 before us, I just want to remind everyone it's consistent with our fiduciary duty It follows a process that we already have in policy. It embraces our belief that engagement can effectuate change. What we're asking for is to make the engagement activities by staff this year to make a priority to engage with those companies that are selling assault-type weapons in our country. So, Chris, I'll turn it over to you. And again, thank you, Chris, for all of your work and your staff's work on presenting this item and the leadership that you've led, that you've demonstrated around a very highly emotional issue. You've been outstanding.
Thanks, Harry. Just for the committee's sake, in the audience, the recommendation from the chair and the vice chair is on INV 30 and involves all of those 6 steps. To try and put a framework together for this engagement, and we've gotten some questions around, why devote an entire person to this. A lot of it has to just our engagement list is quite full, as we discussed earlier. We're trying to engage on climate change, on CEO compensation, board diversity, a number of issues, and we think a dedicated resource would help us to work on this specifically. The recommendation from the chair and the vice chair was also to make this much more public. I think we're increasingly making our activities more public to try and get more support. This issue has been noted by the public comments and by the treasurer, isn't just is state nationwide. Last week, working with Harvard University, I was able to bring together a handful of institutional investors and asset owners to kind of talk about this issue. We discussed trying to build a framework, and they're working on different drafts. So hopefully by the time we get into June, we'll have some kind of at least a nationwide idea of what kind of a framework we can work on. It won't focus just on our issue of assault weapons, so I think we'll have our framework to engage and then work with, but we will be teaming up certainly with other institutions, including several that were noted here. It was a very powerful opportunity to learn. We met with 2 NGOs, and just some of the stats that were noted. There are about almost 39,000 deaths in America last year due to gun violence. Sadly, the majority of those are suicides, almost 60%, and most of them are white males in middle age. But then next is Native Americans. AR-15s are only about less than 5% of gun sales, even though that will be our focus. But the NGOs would point out that America has a handgun problem, not necessarily an assault weapon problem. The number of deaths due to assault weapons and mass murders, shockingly for me too, is actually only about a little bit less than 2% of the number of firearms murders. That's grown from 0, and I think that's the shock to us, is it's gone from 0 to suddenly 2% of the deaths from mass shootings. So we will work with our stakeholders around the country to try and deal with the larger issue, and then also focus our efforts on assault weapons. Within the documents that we gave you, we have learned there are 2 other small companies that do own retail outlets. One of all surprise is Camping World. They bought a Camping World retailer, kind of an outlet that sells products, and it happens to sell guns, which include assault weapons. We also found that there is surprisingly, an incorporated pawn shop company in the Southeast that is listed on the New York Stock, or listed stock. I don't know where it's listed. It's a listed stock, and that is in our portfolio. So we would update our list with 2 more companies that we would get involved and engaged with. So at this point, you've got the recommendation from the chair and the vice chair. We're happy to answer any questions on what we're working on, and await your motion.
Thanks, Chris. I'd like to ask Alan and Steve McCourt, both of our consultants, a view on the item. And
Mr. Chair, members, Alan Emkin, PCA. Forgetting the merits for the moment, the message that I would give you is you make a difference. That people do look at CalSTRS as a leader, and your actions will be replicated by other large institutions. And collectively, not individually, but collectively, you have enormous impact. And your leadership, your willingness to take a proactive stance, in my opinion, will give courage to many other people to follow in your footsteps.
Thank you, Alan. Stephen?
Steve McCourt, Makita Investment Group. I'll just add to the comments that the staff's set of recommendations are thoughtful and very well reasoned, and we concur with them.
Thank you. See Treasurer Chung, you're lined up there.
So at this time, I'd like to make the motion that we accept staff's recommendation and proceed with engagement and persuasion. And should that fail, that this board be positioned to divest its funds from companies that are inundating our communities with military-grade assault weapons.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, it's been, thank you, Treasurer Chung, properly seconded by Sharon Hendricks. We have a motion on the floor. The item is now open for any discussion or question. Betty?
Thank you, Harry. First, let me thank Treasurer Chung for his leadership on this and to the tremendous work of the staff. And really appreciate, Chris, you're reaching out and really looking at this a little bit more globally with other institutional investors as well. Obviously, there's strength in numbers when we do our engagement, and hopefully this aggressive engagement can really signal that we're in this fight to make a difference. So I appreciate that. My question really relates to some of the other work and developments that have happened with respect to indices that don't have gun stocks, and then also financial institutions. Obviously, this is a bigger issue in terms of how we try to get at the root of the problem. And so just with respect to the ongoing engagement with financial institutions, will this be an issue that gets elevated as well on that front?
Absolutely. Our focus will be on manufacturer, retail, and financing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Sharon?
I also just wanted to ask, I see Diane Stanton in the back there. If there are a lot of hyperlinks in this item, and I really appreciate it because it helps, because we've been discussing this, for 5 years now. Do we have a link to the 2-page kind of history that we've done with CalSTRS engagement on there? And I was just wondering if not, if that's something. I found that document really helpful in the stakeholder meetings that we've been having more recently with folks in the room. And I'm just wondering if we could call attention to that document. I know staff spent a lot of time on that, and I honestly think it's been a really powerful tool for just general public and for some of our visitors, our speakers today. I'd love for them to make sure they get a copy of that, because I think it helps contextualize kind of where we've been in this issue, where we are now, and hopefully, where we're headed in the future. So if we could share that with folks that were here today, that would be great. Perfect.
Diane, would you
Thanks,
just come up
Diane.
to the microphone?
Diane Stanton with External Affairs. We do have that available in the American River Room. I don't believe it's hyperlinked to the staff report, but we have extra copies there. So I'll make sure folks have that as well.
Great.
And thank you, Diane, to you and Grant and everyone else that has coordinated folks that ordinarily aren't here, and welcome them to CalSTRS today. Job well done. Paul?
Thank you. So I thank you for everybody for the work that's been done on this, and the public speakers were very compelling. And when I sent my children to public school, I never thought that I would have to worry, and I never did worry about whether they were going to come home. But I now have to think about that when my grandson goes to school, and that's a terrible situation to be in. That said, I want to try to bring us back to our fiduciary responsibility to pay pensions, which is what we're here for. And I think our whole policy about engagement and divestment is that if it gets to the point of divestment, we have failed. Because if it's gotten to the point of divestment, we haven't changed behavior, and we no longer have a seat at the table. And so the issue has to be, how do we engage? And how do we engage? And if we can't do that, then we can divest. We have a process by which we have to determine that the divestment that doing so does not hurt our ability to pay pensions, to earn what we need to earn. And we can get to that. If that's where we get to, we'll rely on I think it's going to be a little bit of a different analysis. I mean, really, this is all about Walmart in terms of materiality, right? I mean, Walmart represents 90% of what was on that list. We're not going to spend, I would think, $280,000 to affect our investment in $8 million of small company investments. It's Walmart, but our ownership of Walmart represents about 1/15 of, about 1/7% of their market cap. So by ourselves, we're not going to be that influential. And I guess that's where I'm going here, is that I'm not questioning that we should do this. I have no questions about that. Because if we can make it, even if it's that we're making a statement that we don't want to be invested in any companies that deal with assault weapons, and we can make that statement and not affect our ability to pay pensions, then that's the nature of our engagement policy and our divestment policy. My question is what our strategy is to get there, because I don't really understand why we're spending $280,000 to hire 2 new people when as leaders, yes, we're leaders, but we're also owners of 1/7, 1/8% of the market cap of Walmart. So it would seem to me that our more effective way to go about this is not to increase our staff, but to develop an organization, an effort with other major institutional investors, perhaps contribute to the staffing up of that effort so that we're a bigger voice. And that would be my only question. And so I would just like to suggest that while I support the board approving going forward, engaging divestment pursuant to our policy, that we rethink because $280,000 hiring 2 new people, that's a big commitment, are we using that money most effectively? Because I think we should be looking to build a coalition of institutional investors, or at least consider that before we decide to hire 2 new people. So I would like to suggest an amendment to the motion that is a little bit less specific about the use of that money, and encourages staff to also consider its focus being to develop a coordinated effort among institutional investors.
I just want to be clear, that is part of the strategy, is to collaborate with others and to be public about the engagement. And so staff is clear about that. Joy and I were very clear with the staff about we don't want to go at this alone. I think there's a common theme going through our investment committee meetings so far today: collaboration, partner with others where we can. Your specific issue around staffing is something I think
I mean, I haven't seen what we're going to use. I mean, two people is a lot of full-time on this. I'd like to understand what they're doing.
Allow staff to respond to how they see and why they need the support. I believe that they do in the conversations that I've had with them, because in the conversations that Joy and I had with the staff leading up to this, we didn't want this initiative, 1, to not be at the top of our priority list in terms of engagement for this year, and 2, we didn't want it to take away from the work that the staff is already doing on initiatives that we've said are really important to the engagement plan. So I said, if you need additional staff to get that done so we can accomplish both, make this a priority, not take anything else off of other people's plates, let's do that, and then evaluate the effectiveness of it. I've been in a position far too frequently where more things are being placed on people's plates and nothing is ever taken off. And I've always said, well, what are you going to take off our plates? You're asking us to do more, but what are you going to? So my suggestion was if it's within the budget and can be handled by the system, let's do that. Chris?
Collaboration is actually already underway. As I said, I hosted a gathering with Harvard Business School of about 12 individuals and a broad collection of not just pension plans, but asset owners and NGOs. So there's an interest in collaboration. I would say, frankly, most of them are looking to us, and several mentioned the need for maybe a center or some kind of an entity to work on this, but there was at that point, no interest in funding something like that, and obviously it takes time to set that up. But we may well see from the NGOs or others that are active in this area that something emerges. I think of something like NERS in the retirement security area. The workload of the person involved in this obviously would be directly involved in our engagement with these retailers. What we have found already, for instance, a week ago, I sat next to the Kroger Investor Relations. I was pleased that they knew our name right away. I didn't have to explain the S versus the P and like we usually do. They knew STRS, they knew who we were. And they were already telling me information about what they were thinking of doing with they have Fred Meyer, just so you know. So Kroger owns Ralph's. For those that live in Southern California, know that name quite well. Own a bunch of grocery stores around the country, but they own Fred Meyer in the Northwest, which in a few states sells firearms. But what we found with some of these companies, I'll pick on Big Five and a few others, is they made bold statements in the press, but when we asked them specifically as a shareholder, they said, well, it's our intent to do that, but we're not sure, say, about Montana, or we're not sure about Alaska. So clearly, this person involved could engage the companies all the way down to that detail to make sure they're really following through with the words they've said publicly. We've had some long discussions with Citicorp, who's made bold statements, Bank of America. They've made the statements, they have a commitment, but they're finding it very complex to drill down into their transactions to be able to then do that. So, Paul, every time there's an issue that arises, boy, it's a steep learning curve for us because I'm certainly not an expert in this area at all. And we've tapped into people who are, but what we realize is the concept at the big picture is very clear, but the execution on the ground is very complex. And that's why we believe having an individual focused in just on this, at least for the next year or two, would absolutely make sense to be able to really get into, keep this momentum that obviously is going in the social consciousness of America and engage these companies. Because our concern is CEOs make a statement and everybody applauds it, but then they get busy back to the rest of the business. And we would be there focusing. The peers that I talked with were very eager to see us step up. They would be gladly fall in behind us, but I have to tell you, even talking to the states where many of these tragedies have happened, I think that expression is they're kind of purple states. They're red and they're blue, and they were not willing to step forward as a pension plan, because as you know, many of the plans aren't very bold in many ways. So they were eager for us, and they would be more than happy to join us. Even the outside non-U.S. shareholders, where this isn't a problem, would be glad to join us in these engagements, lend their name to letters, things like that. So we would be able to speak for certainly more than 1% to 2%, maybe even 3% of the capital when we engage to say, here's a block of shareholders that are concerned about this issue and want to raise your attention. You raised Walmart. Walmart is always a governance challenge because of the large amount of shares owned by the Walton family. And getting their attention is always, as we've learned with lawsuits, always a challenge. But I think we could really actually make a difference, even though they're not very material to our portfolio. We could actually really make a powerful difference in stocks like Camping World and some of these others that will take our attention and have other brand, like Kroger, have other brand images that they are very worried about the reputational damage from this type of an issue. And I think just like we're already seeing, we're getting traction with those people.
Sure, you have the floor, Paul. But one other question is I'm not sure whether what we're talking about here is a focus on retailers who are selling assault weapons, or we're going beyond that, because you mentioned large banks, for example. Are we also targeting financial institutions that provide financing to Walmart? I mean, where do we stop? Because ultimately, everybody in this economy probably can be connected back to Walmart.
No, I know. Well, and obviously it even gets down to transportation and trucking companies. No, I think that's
who supplies the steel that makes these weapons. I mean, where
we're
do we
trying to
stop?
focus it, and I think that's one of the steps we would come back to you with. Is once you make this a priority, we'd come back with a framework for that engagement to try and put some boundaries on it. When I'm talking about financing, I'm not talking about somebody buying Walmart or financing a loan to Walmart. What I'm talking about is the transaction of selling a firearm without a background check versus allowing somebody to sell a firearm with a background check. So that would be the key part of our engagement, but it would be manufacturing, sale, and distribution through financing.
Okay, I think coming back with that framework would be
helpful. Because right now it's a general concept, but we really need to identify it so that our individual out there talking to CEOs knows what to do exactly as well. And to bring other people in, because they'll want to know, okay, what exactly are you focusing on?
Okay, thank you. Alan, it looked like you wanted to weigh in.
Just in response to the financial institutions, at least at the moment, the banks own Remington out of bankruptcy. How long they'll own it, I don't know, but they currently do own a gun manufacturer.
Does that mean you want to divest of those banks? I mean, I don't understand what that means.
To the extent that the board adopts a policy, the potential exists to talk to them about constraints that they would impose or conditions upon the sale of the asset. I'm not saying they would do that. I'm saying the potential exists to do that.
Paul, and I can jump in. We have principles like the Equator Principles that deal with banks financing projects that impact First Nations peoples around the world. What we're trying to develop is that kind of principles as it relates to firearms in general, and we would engage on that. But in any of those cases, the level of materiality obviously becomes a challenge for the banks and for us. And so any of those issues, if we were not able to bring about change, like the banks owning Remington, we would come back to you and we'd have to make a tough decision about if they can't change, do we want to divest? If it's only, some small fraction of their book of business, what do we want to do?
More will be revealed.
It's always a challenge.
Yep.
No question about it.
Jacqueline?
Thank you for your comments. I wanted to thank staff and thank Treasurer Chung for your leadership on this issue. I really appreciated the staff being very, and the architects of this proposal, being very thoughtful about the idea of moving to a public engagement where we do sort of typically more privately engage. I think that makes sense, and that's something that we can do within our fiduciary duty as we really figure out what is the path forward. So I appreciate, again, the thoughtfulness of all of this. I did share some of Paul's concerns about kind of the additional staff and sort of either diverting people or adding in that particular way to our expenses. But I think I feel comfortable with your comments, Chris, about kind of coming back and bringing back the plan and updating the board and making sure that we understand kind of what progress is being done and the extent to which you need, permanent staff versus somebody to sort of ramp this up and who knows, kind of depending on the progress, but that's something on your mind and something that you'll continue to bring back to us.
Dana?
So I'd like to speak in favor of the motion and including the staff's recommendation to add more staff. I think that the past few years we've seen a lot more pushes on us to divest. Our corporate governance staff are challenged to respond to those, develop papers, develop speaking points. I already know that just with what we've already tasked our staff to do, they're stretched pretty thin. And this is going to add a tremendous amount of work into that shop. So I would hope that we would pass this with the added staff. Chris, I'm sure once we're successful with this, that you would absorb that staff as we start to grow our investment shop even bigger. So I don't have any hesitation towards adding that staff.
Betty?
Thank you, Harry. Just on the staffing issue, I think that, actually just with respect to CalSTRS, there really is a void of leadership in terms of how we move forward next. And I think there are all eyes looking to us as a large institutional investor. And I think Treasurer Chung, some of your colleagues across the country, with there's kind of a moral compass about knowing what the right thing to do is, but kind of executing and moving forward is really difficult. And so I think this a cohesive strategy that's being outlined today, and certainly working in collaboration and partnership with other institutional investors and shareholders will make a difference. But something that, Chris, you mentioned, and we're seeing this with our sister fund, just because companies say they're going to do something doesn't mean that it's really concrete. And so the execution is going to be very key. And I hope that as we carry out the strategy and the framework that you bring back, that it really is from A to Z. There's a lot at stake here. Obviously, it goes beyond just the manufacturers that we're looking at and the retailers, but that if we can actually have some diligence around what our expectations are with this effort, I think we are going to make some change, and that just is going to require our dedicating the staff and showing that we're serious about this.
Thank you, Betty. So no one else is in the queue. People said they couldn't stop a war in Vietnam, and the kids did. Drunk driving used to be it was just standard. Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So we're going to do our part, our small part, collectively as an organization today. Individually, we can do what we want, but as an organization within our fiduciary duty, within our current policy, thank you, Treasurer Chung, for making the motion and bringing this forward. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. I want to thank my colleague, Vice Chair Joy Higa, who coordinated with me with staff, and we had a pre-call thinking about this issue after the Florida murders. So we are going to do our part today. I think we can be proud of that. Sadly, it will not end the horrific violence in America's public schools. But maybe in my kids' generation, it won't be a common news story. And we can look back on history and said, we did what we could within the role that we're currently in. So with that, there are no one else in the queue. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We were scheduled to go to 11:45 so why don't we take a break, and we'll come back at 1:45 and we'll start. I know we have a 1 o'clock start. We'll break now. We'll still take the full. Why don't we take an hour for lunch? We'll come back at 12:30. Is that okay? Is that? Yeah. So we'll start at 12:30. Thank you, everyone.